history forgot them. This story, thankfully, doesn't.
Aha.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack compelling stories, sift through the details, and really pull out the insights that matter for you. Today, we're diving into a really powerful novel, Kristin Hannah's The Women. And this isn't just, a book review. It's much more. It's about uncovering a crucial piece of American history, one that's often been silenced, and honestly, it still resonates today.
Absolutely. Our mission here is pretty clear. We want to explore the experiences, often harrowing experiences, of the women who served in Vietnam. We're talking mostly nurses here, seen through the eyes of the main character, Frankie McGrath. We'll be looking at the insights from her story, the incredible challenges these women faced, both over there and, crucially, when they came back, and ultimately try to understand the lasting impact on these, unsung heroes. They really deserve our attention.
Right. And for this deep dive, we're working from a detailed summary of the women. It gives us a really good look at Frankie's personal journey, but also, importantly, the wider historical picture. So let's get into it. Let's unpack Frankie's path to service, which was pretty unexpected, wasn't it?
Completely unexpected, especially given her background. Okay, so it's 1965. We meet Frankie McGrath in Southern California. She's 20, college student, comes from this well-off conservative family. You know the type. Very patriotic, strong supporters of the Vietnam War effort, which was really ramping up then.
And her brother, Finley, he's the golden child, right? He enlists. Big deal in the family. Lots of pride.
Exactly. Big surge of pride. And Frankie's living this, fairly predictable life for a young woman of her class at that time. College, maybe marriage, settling down. But then there's this moment. A friend of Finley's makes this offhand comment, basically saying Frankie will never really make a difference in the war.
Ouch. That sounds like the kind of thing that would just stick with you.
It really does. And it's fascinating, isn't it, how one comment can just ignite something. For Frankie, it wasn't just an insult. It felt like a direct challenge to her purpose, her potential worth, especially when everyone's making such a fuss about Finley going off to serve. It highlights that whole societal view. Back then, women's roles were seen as supportive, maybe important, but not really impactful.
Yeah.
Not in the same league as the men in uniform.
Yeah, less significant somehow.
Yeah.
Which is just infuriating to think about now.
Right. And that comment, maybe combined with this deep admiration for her brother and this powerful desire to actually do something meaningful, it pushes her.
It pushes her onto a path nobody expected. Not her family, not society.
Definitely not. Despite her background, despite what everyone thought she should do, she makes this incredibly bold decision. She decides to enlist in the U.S. Army as a nurse.
Wow. Okay, so not just supporting from home. She's going there.
She's going to Vietnam. Against her family's wishes, you can imagine. They were probably horrified. This wasn't just picking a job. It was a massive statement. A real act of defiance against the life she was supposed to live.
It really was. And you have to think about the context, the limited roles for women in the military back then.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, women's roles were very restricted, mostly support staff, often kept away from the direct danger zones. So for a young woman, especially from her background, to choose to go into a war zone as a nurse, even though it's a medical role, it was still incredibly unconventional. It took immense courage.
Yes, stepping way outside the lines.
It really did. It defied family expectations, societal norms, everything. It kind of foreshadows this quiet bravery of thousands of women who made similar choices, often without any of the recognition the men got. It was like an early crack in those rigid gender roles around service.
So she makes this huge decision, ships out, probably filled with some mix of idealism and maybe apprehension.
You'd imagine so. Idealism, definitely. Believing she's doing something vital, something good. But the reality she finds when she arrives at the 25th evac hospital in Vietnam, it just slams into her instantly.
No easing into it then.
None at all. The summary describes it as just immediate, shocking. The horror of the injuries on these young soldiers, many her age or younger. The constant noise, helicopters roaring in and out nonstop.
Oh God, the sound must have been relentless.
Relentless sound, the screaming, the pervasive smell of blood, antiseptic, death. It wasn't a gradual adjustment. It was immersion in pure chaos, a total sensory assault.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that idealized vision meets this brutal reality.
And it raises that crucial question, doesn't it? How do you cope? How do you keep your humanity, function as a healer, when you're surrounded by that level of suffering day in, day out? It's a unique kind of psychological pressure cooker for medical staff in a war zone. Constant trauma, seeing people your own age grievously wounded, knowing you can't save everyone.
It's hard to even wrap your head around. And it wasn't just the physical danger, right? The emotional toll.
Oh, absolutely. The summary really emphasizes that. Imagine tending to these wounded boys, pouring everything you have into trying to save them, maybe forming a connection in those intense moments, only to watch them die a few hours later. And then the next wave arrives. That cycle of desperate effort, hope, then crushing loss over and over again.
Soul-crushing is the only word that seems to fit. It leaves scars you can't see.
Definitely. But what's also striking, and maybe hopeful in a way, is how these incredibly intense bonds form in that environment. Frankie connects deeply with two other nurses, Ethel and Barb. They become her sisters in trauma, as the book puts it.
A shared experience nobody else could possibly understand.
Exactly. Those relationships became absolutely essential, a lifeline for mental, emotional survival, a space to share the horror, to find empathy. And it's fascinating, amidst all this, Frankie becomes a really good nurse. A phenomenal nurse, actually.
Right. She develops skills under that intense pressure.
Unimaginable pressure, making life or death calls constantly, saving lives. It shows how that kind of adversity can forge incredible competence alongside those deep human connections.
So she's finding her footing professionally, building these vital friendships. But the war isn't done with her. Tragedy strikes on a deeply personal level.
Yeah, just when she's maybe finding some kind of rhythm, however brutal, she gets the news. Her brother, Finley,
Oh, no.
he's been killed in action. The very reason, indirectly, she's even there.
God, that's devastating. And being so far away.
That's the agony of it, isn't it? She's thousands of miles from home, immersed in this daily horror, and then this incredibly personal loss hits her. She can't go home, can't grieve with her family, can't attend the funeral. It just compounds the trauma massively. It leaves that grief sort of stuck.
Unprocessed.
So what does this all mean for Frankie? She's dealing with the war, now this immense personal grief. How does her family react? Do they even understand what she's going through? That's another layer of the tragedy, really. According to the summary, her family, they barely acknowledge her pain. Their focus is all on Finley, on his memory, their own loss, which is understandable, of course, but
they don't ask about her, about what she's seeing, what she's enduring.
apparently not. They never ask about her experiences, her service, her grief. It's this profound silence about her reality.
Wow. That feels like a betrayal almost.
It really does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of trauma recovery, that kind of familial silence, that lack of validation, is incredibly damaging. When you go through something horrific, having your closest people acknowledge it, see your pain, is crucial for healing. Their inability to do that, maybe because it didn't fit their idea of war or heroism.
Or maybe they just couldn't handle it.
Possibly. But the effect on Frankie is profound emotional neglect. It basically tells her her suffering doesn't count or isn't real. It forces her to internalize everything, making the isolation even worse. It's like being re-traumatized by the people who should be your safe harbor.
So the war keeps grinding on. And it's clear it's not just happening around her anymore. It's happening inside her.
Exactly. You see her starting to break down emotionally. Despite those bonds with Ethel and Barb, she becomes more isolated. The nightmares start. Terrible, vivid nightmares.
PTSD setting in, clearly.
Clearly. And this simmering rage starts to build up inside her, maybe directed at the war, the loss, the unfairness, maybe even at herself. And that survivor's guilt becomes crippling. Why did she live when Finley died? When so many others died under her care? It's a torment.
It's clear the war wasn't just an event she attended. It became part of her in a really destructive way.
It's a complete internal collapse unfolding, a direct result of the constant trauma, the loss, and crucially, the lack of acknowledgement, that invalidation of her experience.
So after enduring all of that, the war zone, the loss, the internal battles, she finally comes home. You'd hope, you'd expect some kind of welcome, relief maybe.
Recognition.
That's what she expected. Maybe not parades, but something, some acknowledgement of what she'd been through, what she'd done. But that's not what happened, is it? Imagine coming home, carrying all that, and being met with what?
Coldness, indifference, even hostility. A country that didn't recognize her service didn't want to know. It was a crushing disillusionment.
How specifically did that play out? The summary mentions some stark examples.
Yeah, it was brutal on multiple fronts. Her own parents, remember them, still held on to that idea that women didn't really serve. So dismissal right there at home.
Unbelievable, after everything she saw and did.
Then there were the institutions. The VA, the government, they often dismissed women's service as non-combat. Even the nurses who were right there in the thick of it, which meant denying them recognition, denying them benefits, denying them the health care they desperately needed for their physical and psychological wounds.
That's infuriating. A systemic erasure.
Completely. And what's fascinating in a horrifying way is why this happened. Why was their service so actively ignored, even demonized? It ties back to those rigid ideas about gender and war. Women in those roles challenged the traditional narrative. Society, the government, they weren't ready or willing to acknowledge that women faced danger, sacrificed, and suffered just like the men, sometimes in different but equally profound ways.
And then there was a public reaction.
Yeah, the summary mentions the really awful stuff. People spitting on uniforms, calling returning vets, including women, baby killers.
Yeah.
Just horrific projections and anger directed at the very people who had served. It was an active hostility on top of the neglect.
So, rejected by family, dismissed by institutions, shamed by the public. What does that do to someone already grappling with severe trauma?
It sends them into a spiral. Frankie descends rapidly into deep depression, full-blown PTSD. She turns to addiction pills, alcohol, trying desperately to numb the pain, the memories, the rejection.
The self-medication, basically.
A classic tragic response. She gets involved in fleeting, unhealthy relationships, again, trying to feel something, or maybe nothing. She loses her nursing job. How could she function? She isolates herself completely. The summary even mentions multiple near-death experiences during this period, likely from the addiction and despair.
This wasn't just a bad patch. This was a complete collapse, fueled by that profound societal neglect.
Absolutely. It underscores how vital post-service support and recognition are. When that's denied, especially to those whose service is already marginalized, the internal wounds just fester and explode in civilian life. It's a devastating outcome.
But even in that darkness, the book offers some glimmers of hope, right? It wasn't entirely bleak.
Not entirely. Kristin Hannah shows these small, persistent lights. Ethel, her friend from Vietnam, keeps reaching out. Gently, persistently, even when Frankie can't really respond. And Barb, the other friend, she channels her own experiences into activism. She finds a purpose in fighting for recognition for women vets.
So connections were still there, even if faint.
Exactly. And those connections, however fragile, are so important. They're like seeds for future healing. Ethel's persistence, Barb's example. They keep a tiny thread of hope alive. They remind Frankie, even subconsciously perhaps, that she's not totally alone, that maybe, just maybe, recovery is possible down the line. It highlights that enduring power of connection.
And eventually she does start to fight back. She hits rock bottom.
Absolute rock bottom, a place of utter hopelessness. But from there, somehow, she begins the climb back. It's portrayed as this incredibly long, difficult fight.
This is where that resilience really comes through, isn't it? After everything.
Phenomenal resilience. She makes the choice to go into rehab, then starts therapy. The summary stresses it's a slow, painful process. No magic wands here.
Just hard, grinding work, reclaiming her life piece by piece.
Exactly. And you have to admire that sheer will to fight for yourself when the world, even your own mind sometimes, seems to have given up on you. It's a different kind of heroism, isn't it? The quiet battle for recovery.
And there's a turning point, a major one, in that recovery journey.
Yes. A huge turning point. She finds her way into a support group specifically for Vietnam women veterans.
Finally, people who get it.
Precisely. For the first time, she hears other women telling her story, sharing her pain, her trauma, her sense of betrayal and invisibility, and that crushing silence that had suffocated her for years. It finally starts to lift. She realizes she wasn't crazy, she wasn't exaggerating, she wasn't alone.
The power of shared experience. Validation.
It's absolutely vital. If we connect this to the bigger picture, community and shared narrative are critical for healing trauma, especially when the official systems fail you. Group therapy, that mirroring effect of seeing your experience in others, it normalizes the reactions, dismantles the shame, breaks the isolation. Speaking your truth in a safe space is incredibly therapeutic. It's often the key that unlocks real, long-term recovery.
So finding that community was the catalyst she needed.
It seems to be the crucial catalyst. It shifts everything from suffering alone to healing together.
And her journey continues, even leading her back to Vietnam.
Yes, years later, as part of a veterans delegation, she returns to the very place that scarred her so deeply. And standing there, on that soil, she finally allows herself to fully mourn, to process the grief and trauma in a way she couldn't before. It's described as a profound moment of healing, of finding some measure of peace.
A full circle moment.
In many ways. And the novel closes with her doing something incredibly powerful, writing the stories of the women who served alongside her, the women whose experiences were silenced for so long.
Ensuring they're remembered, honored, believed.
Exactly. It's an act of legacy creation. Which brings us to that important question. How do we make sure these stories aren't forgotten again? Her writing isn't just personal catharsis, it's actively correcting the historical record. It's challenging the dominant narrative that erased these women. It shows the power of personal stories to reshape our understanding of history.
So reflecting on Frankie's journey and this whole deep dive, what are the absolute key takeaways we need to hold on to?
Well, first, the sheer scale of the contribution that was ignored. Over 11,000 American women served in Vietnam, most as nurses right there in the danger zones. That's not a footnote. That's a significant force.
A force that was largely invisible in the history books for decades.
Precisely. And that leads to the second key takeaway, the profound injustice of that erasure. They were ignored, denied benefits, denied recognition, and left to suffer the consequences. PTSD, addiction, isolation, largely alone. It was a systemic failure, born from societal biases about women in war, and it caused immense lasting harm.
And that's where the novel The Women becomes so important.
Absolutely. Its contribution is huge because it doesn't just give us facts, it gives us Frankie. It immerses us in her pain, her resilience, her voice. It makes that history human, relatable, unforgettable. It forces you to feel the impact of that neglect.
Yeah, fiction is a vehicle for truth and empathy. It can reach people in ways that straight history sometimes can't.
Exactly. It bypasses intellectual defenses and goes straight to the heart, forcing a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about our past and how we remember it. It gives faces and feelings to the forgotten statistics.
So wrapping this up, The Women isn't just another war novel. It's really a story about being erased, about the incredibly hard fight to recover, and about the, frankly, astonishing strength of women to rebuild after being broken by war. Yes, but also by the silence and neglect back home. Frankie's story gives a voice to so many who were never heard.
We always remember the soldiers, the men who served, and that's right and important. But this deep dive, this book, really hammers home that it's long past time we remember the women too. Their service, their sacrifice, their resilience.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to take away. What other vital histories might be missing from our collective memory? Whose stories haven't we heard? Think about the major events you learned about. Are there perspectives, contributions, particularly from marginalized groups that were maybe glossed over or ignored entirely? What forgotten histories resonate with you, and how can we all work to bring those stories into the light? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.